Hi, this is Ali Arango of Little Guy CGI, and today I would like to show you how to quickly make speed lines in Blender 2.79. So let's get started. Okay, if this is your first time in Blender, I recommend you go to File, User Preferences, go to Input, and then choose Select with left click. Blender's default select is with right click, and this may confuse you if you're coming from Adobe programs or other 3D programs. Also, while you're in here, click on Add-ons, and then put a check mark next to 3D View: 3D Navigation. Okay, so what are speed lines and why are we talking about them? Typically, speed lines are used in comic books as well as manga to convey a sense of speed. You can see an example of speed lines right here. So typically, if a character is moving to the side, you might see these speed lines behind the character. If the character was throwing a punch or a kick, you might see speed lines like this. Sometimes these are also called focus lines. Also, when you're dealing with 2D animation, if you want to have a character moving quickly, as far as dealing with the background, a lot of times you can use speed lines, and by using the speed lines, you don't have to draw an additional background. As far as 3D animation, if you are working on a 3D animation, you're trying to keep production time as well as production costs down by using 3D characters in your animation, but for the most part using 2D backgrounds. As long as those backgrounds are stationary and your characters are viewed by a stationary camera, for the most part you will not be able to notice that you're using 2D backgrounds. However, if you want to have the camera turn as it tracks your character and dynamically turn, that's a situation where you might emphasize the fact that you're using 2D backgrounds when you don't want to emphasize that fact. So how do you get around that? Well, one of the things you can do is if you have a character jump up and do some type of action motion and you want to move the camera, what you can do is you can put in speed lines, and those speed lines, along with conveying more of a sense of action, more of a sense of speed, also hide the fact that as your camera is turning dynamically, because you don't see any backgrounds, you're hiding the fact that you're generally using 2D background. So there's multiple reasons to use speed lines. Sometimes they're also called speed stripes, but those are some of the reasons why you might be interested in and want to use speed lines. Okay, so to bring in our speed lines and set them up, what we want to do is click on our display tab over to our left. We then want to go to a front view. So I just left clicked on front. You can see up here we're in a front orthographic view. I'm going to right click right in front of my character. When I right clicked, you can see this little symbol right here. In Blender, this is our 3D cursor. Where this 3D cursor is at is where objects tend to come into Blender at. So from the front view, our 3D cursor is where I want it to be. I'm going to left click on right view, and now we can see our 3D cursor is in front of our character, well, kind of in front of our character, but on the side it's too close to our character. So I'm going to right click here so that our 3D cursor is in front of our character. So we want the 3D cursor in front of our character because we want to bring in an object, and from that object, that's where our speed lines are going to come from. Okay, so with this 3D cursor here, we're going to hold shift. While holding shift, we're going to press A. This brings up our add to menu. We're then going to select plane. So when our plane comes in, the plane is up and down. We don't want that. We want the plane to be facing towards our character. So I'm going to press, you can see there, see this orange line? It's kind of difficult to see. So now, there you go. You can see it better now. So here's our plane. So with this plane selected, you can tell the plane is selected because it's highlighted orange. I'm going to press R to rotate on the x-axis 9, 0. And then I'm going to either press enter or left click to lock in. So I'm going to left click to lock that turn in, that rotation turn in. Okay, now that we have our plane rotated, how we want it to be rotated, what we want to do is we want to subdivide our plane. So When you come into Blender currently, when you come into Blender, you're typically in object mode. Currently, we're in object mode. When you look here, you can see we're in object mode. What we want to do is go to edit mode for our plane. So we want to make sure our plane is selected. It is, because it's highlighted orange. Then we want to look towards the bottom, then click near one of these, near or on one of these two arrows, and then select edit mode. Here in edit mode, and with the plane selected, I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate my view. I'm going to press W. This brings up our specials menu. I'm then going to select subdivide. Okay, when I clicked subdivide, I'm basically just adding geometry to this plane. And when we look to our left, we can see that after I subdivide it, we now have this menu that says number of cuts. If you don't see this menu by any chance, press the T key and this menu will pop up. So with this number of cuts here, let's take this up to 10. So I'm just left clicking on this arrow to take this up to 10. Okay, so now that we have a decent amount of cuts, and I'll rotate the view so you can see. So when I say cuts, I'm talking about these horizontal as well as these vertical slices going through this plane. We want to know which direction our normals are facing. Okay, what is a normal? A normal is the way that a plane is basically, or a piece of geometry is meant to face. It's important because we want our speed lines to be going towards our character. So how can we see which way the normals are supposed to go? Well, we can do that by using this menu. This is our properties panel menu. So if you don't see this, press the N key and this menu will pop up. With this menu open, what you want to do is scroll down. And what you're going to see is underneath mesh display, you'll see something that says normals. And where you see normals, you'll see these three buttons right here. I recommend you click the face normal. And then basically what you can see is there's these, they almost look like hairs that have popped up. And if I rotate the middle mouse button, I know the background is blue as well, you can see that these normals are facing that direction. So they're facing away from our character. If we hold the middle mouse button to rotate to this side and we look, we can see that there's no blue lines coming out this side. So our normals are definitely going that way, away from our character. So what we can do is press, with our plane selected, we can press R to rotate on the x-axis 180, and then press enter to lock that in. And now when we look, we can see that our normals are facing towards our character. So now with that, what we want to do is press S to scale. And we want this being the plane to be big enough to cover our character from the front. Okay, now with that done, what we want to do is we want to press A to deselect. I had everything selected because I had pressed A before. Now what we want to do is press C for paint select. We also want to be on face select, so I didn't press paint select yet. Now I'm pressing C. You can see this circle popped up. If I roll my mouse wheel, I can make the circle bigger. If I roll it the other way, I can make it smaller. I'm going to use this circle to paint. And I am using it to paint to select. So when you hear me say paint, I'm painting to select. Okay, so with this selected, and when I say this, I mean this geometry, I'm going to right click to get out of paint select. And then I'm going to press the X button to bring up our delete menu. And then now I'm going to select faces to delete those faces. The reason why I did that is we're going to have our speed lines come out from here. And I want the speed lines to be, for the most part, to be behind our character. So that's the reason why we got rid of this space here. So our character won't be engulfed in the speed lines. So I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate just to take a look. Okay, now that we know which direction our normals are going, I'm going to click here to take away our normals from coming out of these planes here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go near the bottom. I'm going to click on one of the two triangles, and I'm going to go from edit mode back to object mode. Here in object mode, I'm going to move my mouse over towards the right side of the screen. I am going to hover over the menu near the upper right. I'm rolling my mouse wheel. I can either hold my middle mouse down to move this panel or roll my mouse wheel to move this panel. So sometimes you won't be able to see this entire panel here. So that's when you would hold your middle mouse button or you would roll your mouse button to move this. Okay, so make sure that your plane is selected. Click on, it looks like a bunch of little stars. This is our particle system. What you want to do then is click New. And when you clicked New, you put a particle system on this plane. And typically you would use particles to have small objects basically come out, and typically they would, if you can think of like how rain looks or when it snows, particle system kind of look like that. What we're going to do is, if you look here, you can see there's like particles on here ready to go. What we're going to do is we're going to go to where we see type emitter. Then we're going to go to one of these two triangles. We're going to left click and we're going to select hair. Okay, so you can see basically here's the basis of our speed lines right here. However, the length is kind of short. So if we look right here, so we're looking towards the right side of the screen where we see hair length, we have this setting saying 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click here, and I'm actually going to change this setting to 50, which is 50, and press enter. And this just, I'm going to roll the mouse wheel back. This just gives us, you know, more than enough for our speed lines. So now with that done, this right here is what is emitting these hairs out, right? If you look here, you can see this render button. So this is basically telling us what's going to render. So we don't want this to render. So what we're going to do is take away this check mark next to emitter. And what that means is that when we go to render this out, however we choose to do that, whether we use the viewport, typically I'll use the viewport a lot now just because you can render animations extremely quickly. I'm greatly looking forward to Eevee coming out. Also, without getting into that, if you are rendering just how you would regularly render as well, you know, taking this emitter away will make it so that, you know, you don't have to, in your render, see this geometry right here. Okay, I want to take away this properties panel, so I'm going to press the N key to take that away. As far as coloring our speed lines, I'm going to click right here, materials, I'm going to click new. You can make the color be whatever you want. You're just going to click on this white block right here. I want the color to be black, so I'm going to choose black, or like a very dark gray. However, this could be blue, it could be green, it could be yellow, it could be whatever you want it to be. So I'm going to just slide this slider down to make this like a very dark gray. And then what I'm going to do is, and you can see that we don't see a change here yet, just click plus right here and then new. And even though we made the material here, this material up top, this will be the color that your speed lines will be. Okay, now that we have the color for our speed line set up, what you want to do is hold the middle mouse button to rotate your view. You can hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan your view. You want to get this view that you're looking at here to be how you want your camera to be. Once you have that set up, if you have a number pad on your keyboard, you can press Control Alt and then number pad 0, and your camera will go right to this view. Or if you don't have a number pad on your keyboard, you can go to View, go to Align View, and then go to Align Active View to Camera. So I'm just going to left click right here, and when I did that, my camera jumped to try to position itself to the view that we're currently looking at. Okay, I want the camera to be adjusted more, so what I'm going to do is press the N key to bring up our properties panel. I'm going to take this slider and move up, and I'm looking for lock camera to view. Kind of difficult to see, but this is lock camera to view right here. I'm going to put a check mark next to lock camera to view. And what this does is this makes it so that this red line is showing us the inside of our camera. So everything inside of this red line is our camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Control, hold the middle mouse button, and then pull my mouse down to zoom back. And I did that so we could have our character fully in the camera view. I'm going to hold Control, hold the middle mouse button, pull back more. I'm going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button and pan. I'm actually pulling down with my mouse just to pan the view more. And with this being set up how I want it to be, I'm going to go back to where we see our lock camera view. I'm going to take away this check mark. Now I'm going to roll my mouse. So now I'm just, zooming the mouse by rolling the mouse. I'm going to click on the object that our emitter is, the object that is our emitter. So our speed lines are coming from here. And see how we have this space right here. I want this camera view to be filled up with speed lines. So I'm just going to push this out of the way. So all we see is our character and the speed lines. Okay, as far as the speed lines, that's a lot of lines. So we can reduce this. So make sure you're clicked on the plane that is your emitter for your speed lines. And then what you want to do is click back on the particle system to your upper right. You want to look down to where you see emission. So where you see emission and the number is 1,000, you can click here and change this number to what you like. I tend to think 250 looks good. So I'm going to click here and change this number to 250 and then press enter to lock that in. And now you can see there are a lot less speed lines here. Now, and I think this looks better how this is. I have this plane right here that I was using for this animation. I'm going to click on this plane, press M to bring up our move to layer panel. This just allows me to move the plane to another layer. So I'm going to click here to get that plane out of the way. Okay, now I'm going to zoom in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to display in my properties panel. I'm going to put a check mark next to only render. And with this, when I click this only render, it's going to take away these lines here. And it's going to just show us what would be in the render. So I'm going to click only render. And now I'm going to click, well, I'm going to take this back to the beginning. And now you can see our character here running. And doesn't look too exciting. And we have our speed lines here. However, because the speed lines are stationary, I don't think it looks good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here to pause this animation. I'm going to click near the bottom to go back to the beginning of the timeline. Our character is coming out near the top, so I'm going to put a check mark back on lock camera view. I'm going to hold control, hold my middle mouse button, and then pull back just so that our character is fully in view. I have this area right here where there's no speed line, so I'm going to unclick this lock camera view, zoom back, unclick this only render. What I'm going to do is click on this plane, press S to scale, and just by scaling this up, I can make the area of the speed lines bigger, and that covers up that space right there. Then I'm going to take this manipulator and just push this forward some. Okay, so what can we do about these speed lines? They're here, but there's no movement to them. It's actually fairly easy. What we want to do is look towards the bottom of our screen. See where you see these keys here? These keys allow me to easily put in keyframes. A keyframe is generally how you set up animations in Blender. Currently, this is set for lock rot, which stands for location rotation. I use that to set up this run cycle on this character here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on these keys, and I'm going to select just location. And now with just that location set, I'm going to make sure that I am on my timeline on frame 1. This is the timeline here. This allows you to work with animations. If you look at this green line, this is our timeline indicator. This shows us where we're at on the timeline. And we can also see from right here that we're on the first frame of our timeline. So here on the first frame of our timeline, and with our plane here selected, I'm going to hold control in the middle mouse button to zoom back some. What we can do is press I. So when I pressed I, now there's a little yellow line showing that there's a keyframe on this emitter here. And that's what we want. We only need one keyframe. And what we're about to do is just add some motion to these speed lines. An easier way for us to work to do that is to go to Blender's animation workspace. If you look here, you can see we're in Blender's default workspace. So what we want to do is click on one of these two white triangles near the top of our screen. We're going to left click, and then we're going to select animation. And then here in animation, what we have is, it's actually a cool view right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press the T key to bring up our tools panel. I'm going to select display, and then I'm going to select the right view. I'm going to zoom back. So now here's our character to the right. Our background was blue. The reason why you can't see it here is because I have the background being blue, and I have a check mark next to this world background in our other workspace. So I'm going to click that. Now you can see there's our background color. If you wanted to change the background color, what you could do is click here, and I'm clicked on the world tab. You can look down to where you see horizon color. You can left click here, and then you can just select whatever color you want. Okay, now that we're in the animation workspace, what we want to do is hover our mouse here. We want to drag this up just to give ourselves more room. Then we want to hover here and then left click and drag to the side. You need enough room here for our modifier panel to pop up. If you don't see the modifier panel pop up, which it shouldn't be popping up yet, so we haven't done it yet, but if you don't, it's because you need enough room here to see it. So we have our location keyframe here. We can see these dots right here are also another place showing our keyframes. What we want to do is click on this white triangle. We then want to select X location. We can tell we're selected on X location because this is highlighted white. Now what we want to do is hover our mouse over this window. This is our F curve window. In Blender, where your mouse is at determines how your keyboard shortcuts function. So if you try to press a keyboard shortcut and your mouse isn't over the right area, you'll tend to get different results. So make sure your mouse is right over this area, and then press the N key to bring up this panel right here. Okay, getting motion to our speed lines is actually fairly easy, and I'm going to play very quickly just so you can see how this looks now, right? Pretty boring. Check this out. Okay, so now we're just going to click here to go back to frame 1. I just like it being on frame 1. For what we're doing here, this actually doesn't need to be on frame 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the modifier panel, and then with this X location selected, we're just going to left click, select noise. We're then going to go to the Z location, click here, and then select noise, and then just like that, I'm going to select play. Look at the difference. With my mouse hovered here, I'm going to hold Shift, press space, and just that little shake adds so much to those speed lines. So there you go. So I'm going to hold Shift, and then while holding Shift, press space just to go back to this window here. I'm going to click here to pause that, and then put that back to the beginning of our timeline, that being our timeline indicator. Okay, what we're going to do now is go to the top of our screen. We're going to left click near the animation workspace. We're going to go back to our default workspace, and we have our character from the side. What's cool is we can go to our properties panel. It's kind of difficult to see, but I'm basically right next to the lock camera to view. I'm going to put a check mark there again. Now I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Now I'm holding Shift and the middle mouse button to rotate the view. And now with this set up, I'm going to unclick this lock camera to view. I'm going to make sure I'm clicked on the plane. Then I'm going to press S to scale. I'm going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to click on lock camera to view again. I'm going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan the view. And I'm going to hold Control and the middle mouse button to zoom in. Hold Shift. Holding Shift and the middle mouse button to go down. I click on this plane, press R to rotate on the Z axis. There we go. I'm going to put a check mark, take away this check mark next to the lock camera view. I'm going to hold Control and the middle mouse button to zoom in. And this is just another perspective. So pretty cool. And here you could actually might help to increase the speed lines right here. Let's see what that looks like. I'm going to click here, go here. I'm going to zoom back, make sure I'm clicked on the speed line emitter. I'm going to take this up to 500. Let's click play and see how this looks. So I'm rolling the mouse wheel to zoom in, and that looks better. Definitely think this perspective looks better with more speed lines. I'm going to put a check mark next to only render. Oh, very nice. So I'm going to come here and pause this. I'm going to click near the bottom to take our timeline indicator back to frame 1. Okay, I'm going to go to only render, take away this check mark here. I'm going to zoom back. Suppose you want your character coming straight towards the screen. A lot of times you wanted to have a character throw a punch, or the character is doing some kind of jump kick, or you might have the character coming straight towards this screen. How would you do that? I'm going to click here. I'm going to press the M key. I'm selected on our emitter for our speed lines. I'm going to move this out of the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a check mark next to lock camera to view. And I'm manipulating the camera just so that our character is now coming directly towards us. I'm going to unclick lock camera to view now. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. One of the reasons I did that was just to come out of the camera view. It's an easy way to do it, is just hold the middle mouse button to rotate. Okay, we have our 3D cursor still right in front of our character. That's great because it's set up so we can bring another object in. I'm going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button to rotate. What are we going to bring in this time? We're going to hold Shift A, and what we're going to bring in is we're going to go to Mesh. Then we're going to go to Circle. So we have a circle that just came in. When we first bring a circle in, when we look to our left, we can see here's our Add Circle panel. We have vertices here. I'm going to left click and change this from 32 to 20, and then press Enter to lock that in. Hold the middle mouse button so you can see here is a circle, and this is a mesh circle. So this is just vertices made up as a circle. So what we want to do is with this circle selected, we want to left click and go to Edit Mode. Okay, what we're going to do is go to Vertex Select. We're going to press E to extrude. I'm going to right click. I'm then going to press S to scale this up. I am then going to press A to deselect. I'm going to go near the bottom, change from edit mode to object mode with our circle selected. I'm going to press R to rotate on the X-axis 90, and then press Enter to lock that in. We're actually going to make this circle be behind our character, and we want the speed lines coming out. So coming from behind our character. If we want to check to make sure what our normals are, we can go back to edit mode. We can scroll down in our properties panel, click here. Now we can see the normals are going that direction, and that's the direction that we want them to go in. So we'll click here. We'll then left click, go back to object mode. We'll pull this circle behind our character. And now I'm going to hold Shift and middle mouse button to pan. What we're going to do is now, let's go to a front view. I'm going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan. And we want to have our camera facing our character like this. So what we're going to do is go to View, Align View, and then Align Active Camera to View. So now we have our camera set up like that. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button. That took us out of the camera view. That's fine. With our circle here selected, we're going to go to our particle settings. We're going to select New. We're going to go to Emitter, change this to Hair. We're going to go to our length. This time we'll make our length be 20. Press Enter to lock that in. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the front view of our camera again. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, we're going to go for because the colors is the same. I couldn't see them because we're in an orthographic perspective. To put color on our speed lines, we're going to click New, pick a color. This time I'm going to pick like a darker blue, and then we'll click plus, and then we're going to click View Camera, and we can see right here is our speed lines being shown. Let's click New here to get that color. I'm going to hold them in a mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to click on our circle and press S to scale. Now let's click View Camera again. Now what we're going to go to our Properties panel here. We're going to look for Display. We're going to select only render, and we still have this rendering, this being the emitter, because we didn't, in our properties panel, we didn't, not our properties panel, I'm sorry, in our particle system, we didn't take away this check mark next to emitter. So now when we click only emitter, we see this right here. And now it looks like our character is, has speed lines as the character is coming forward. If we want more distance around the character, we can hold them in a mouse button, rotate the view, take a check mark away from only render, press S to scale. We'll click to go back to camera view. We'll select only render again. And now it looks like our character is, set up to come forward. We can also, by the way, I'm going to hover here, pull this down. This is our circle here. We can select our circle in this window. It's called the outliner. And then with our circle here selected, we can press S to scale. And in this way, we can adjust how we want our speed lines to look. We can also press G and then Z to move that up. We could also press G, then X to move our speed lines from left to right as well. Okay, so if we press play, we have our character animating. I'm going to pause that, and just like before, that looks, pretty boring. I'm actually going to, with the circle select, I'm going to press S and make our S to scale to make our circle bigger. I'm going to press S to scale, make that a little bigger. I'm going to press play again. I'm going to press G and then Z to move the circle down. I just didn't want the character actually touching the speed lines. Okay, so I'm going to take this back to the beginning. So to have our character, our speed lines not just sit there, we make sure we're clicked on our circle. We'll go to, here we'll make sure we're on frame 1. We'll press I to put one location keyframe on this. If you look here, here's location. That's why when we press I, we get a location keyframe because we had set this up previously. We'll left click here, go to our, when I say here, I'm left clicking near the top. We're selecting the 2 arrows near the default. Then we're going to select animation. Here back in animation, we're still selected on a circle. And we can see that from our outliner here. We want to click the white triangle next to location, select X. Go to our modifier panel, left click, select noise to put a noise modifier on, go to our Z location, go back to our add modifier, and then left click to put a noise modifier on the Z location as well. Okay, with all that done, we'll go near the top of our screen. We'll click on one of the 2 triangles next to our animation workspace. We'll then go to our default view. We'll select View Camera. We'll go to our Properties panel, put a check mark next to Only Render, and then we'll click Play. And now we have motion again. And we actually can have more from this viewpoint, our motion looks like it could use some more erraticness, if it's even a word. I'm going to click here, go back to the animation tab. With these settings here, like this location, with our modifier, if we left click and drag, we can see there's settings here that actually have things like strength here. So we can actually adjust these modifier settings here. Okay, in this situation, we only have 23 frames. So I find that changing the strength doesn't do much. However, when you look to this phase, if we take this from 1 to 5 and then press enter, what should happen is we'll have more shake, even though we have a fairly few amount of frames. So we're going to go near the top, click on one of the two triangles next to our animation workspace. We're going to go back to our default workspace. We're going to make sure we have our circle clicked on. We're clicked on. If not, you can go right to this outliner window. And before I said I didn't want the legs to touch here. Now when I look at this, I realize like the way this is with the blue in the background, it looks like our character is like about to come into action. We want to use this speed line, since we have them, to have our character look like it's in action, look like it's like coming down a tunnel, if you will, of speed. So with this circle selected, I'm going to press S to scale. And just by doing that, that makes it look like our character is in the tunnel, so to say. And with that phase modifier taken up, we took it from 1 to 5. Now when we click play, and I like the look of that. Okay, another thought that I had on speed lines was, and I had this thought just making this tutorial, was if you have a character where the character puts on a costume, and the character, you're doing an animated series, and each episode the character puts on this costume. If the character's in different locations, by using speed lines, you could have that character, put on their costume, and then use that scene over and over again, because you don't have the background. You don't have to be concerned about the background being the same background, so you're able to reuse those scenes. So that was just a thought. Okay, guys, that's it for the tutorial. For all of those of you out there who like the videos on this channel and reshare them, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And for those of you who are new to this channel, if you like the videos on this channel and you would like to see more, please subscribe, and thank you for viewing.